Hey, what's up guys? Henry here from Xbox On, giving you a very sneak preview of some gameplay from the upcoming Immortals Fenyx Rising from Ubisoft. Now this game did used to have a previous name, it was known as Gods and Monsters, but it's here now with a brand new title, and this is our very first chance to get hands-on with the game. And I wanted to show off a few different areas of the game that I think are the most interesting. So we'll be looking at the three kind of core gameplay pillars that I like to think of. We've got the adventure side of it, where you get to explore the huge map. We did only get to play with a small section of it, but it was quite beautiful. I was really impressed with the different landscapes. And obviously we can take a look at the larger map later on in the video, so you can see how big the game is going to be. But we're also going to take a long look at a lot of the combat, which looks to be really fun, really fluid, with some really cool gameplay mechanics behind that. And then finally, the third gameplay pillar that I think is going to be really important for this game, and one that's going to make people really excited to play it, is the puzzle mechanics, which are actually super fun and super rewarding. And it all kind of comes together to just bring out quite a unique experience that I think fans of Xbox adventure games are absolutely going to love. So let's jump into some gameplay of Immortals Fenyx Rising. Don't forget, if you love this video, drop a follow and subscribe as well for more notifications.
It is actually pronounced Ubisoft.
Ah, the French.
Now, as I mentioned, we're going to take a look at some combat in particular, and we'll start right off with a bit of a tougher fight against two of the tougher enemies that I came across. We joined this gameplay about halfway through one of the missions that I'd started, where we need to reactivate some vents for the main forge of this area to bring it back alive so that we can actually help the god Hephaestus. Now, as I mentioned, this is a game that's centered around Greek mythology. So you will recognize probably a few of the Greek gods' names and certain characters from the mythology in particular. This area of the map that we're on is Hephaestus' region, and it's all centered around kind of fire and different like sort of wind tunnels as well. All the enemies typically have like fire element attacks or designs to them, which is quite cool. And I'm looking forward to see how they bring out the other areas to match the other gods and goddesses of Greek mythology to stylize maybe the enemies. So obviously if we happen to see water elements, you probably would expect some water enemies, for example. But right now I was still getting to grips with the gameplay in terms of the combat system. But for fans of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and let's just remind you that this game actually comes from the same team that made that game, you will probably become quite familiar with it very quickly. It does share some similarities in terms of combat, but it takes a bit of a step forward as well by adding in some more aerial attacks like the one I just triggered there. You start to string together combos, you start juggling your enemies as well, and it all becomes quite fun. So if you're a fan of Devil May Cry's sort of stylish action method of combat, you're probably going to have a lot of fun with Immortals. But those big damage attacks that I've been triggering, and especially the one with the Phoenix just then shooting the fireballs, are all courtesy of your special abilities that you learn from the gods. You activate those by just holding down the left bumper and then choosing a face button or the right trigger to activate them. And they usually deal your biggest amounts of damage, or they might have secondary effects like stunning your enemies or generating more stamina orbs. All of that will become really important very, very soon. I'll show you guys what everything on screen kind of means. But obviously at the very bottom you can see that's the health meter as I just take a big chunk of damage. Right next to Phoenix, who is the main character in the game that you play as, you can also see that there is a vertical blue bar, and that is your stamina during combat, which you do use to trigger any of the godly abilities, which you can see in the bottom right, next to the sign that says LB. And then on the D-pad, you also have all your potions, which can help you by healing. It can give you some more stamina, or it can also actually boost your damage or defense in combat, which is pretty cool. So now we just saw a bit of combat in the gameplay. What we're actually going to take a look at next is a slight more look at the puzzle element. As I mentioned, there's kind of three core gameplay pillars that I like to think of. We have the combat, the puzzle, and then the adventure. Puzzling does become quite evidently important in Immortals Fenyx Rising. And one of the cool ways that they implement that is with these sort of mini puzzles that you'll find along the way, but also these vaults that you can enter. And they sort of frame them more as trials with rewards at the end, and sometimes even secret rewards, which I did manage to find a couple during my couple of hours of gameplay that I had with this title. Now right now you can see that the puzzle's centered around trying to get one of these cubes out of this room. But obviously there's some lasers in the way, as well as there being a big red gate across the door. So I can't actually remove anything yet. For those of you that are pretty smart, you probably figure out that I need to put something on the pressure plate in order to open the door, and then navigate the middle cube to the end of the room so that I can get it out safely, without getting killed by the lasers. And it's these little gameplay elements and puzzles that really help tie together a lot of the breaks in between the combat and the adventuring side of Immortals. Don't worry, I'll get there eventually. You'll also notice on the floor, on the actual pressure pads themselves, that one of them has a feather and the other one has an anvil. And that just is meant to signify the difference between the weights of these two cubes. So I need a big weight on the anvil and a lighter weight on the feather. Now, although this is one of the simpler puzzles, it does eventually get more and more difficult. And there was a particularly challenging puzzle called a constellation puzzle later on in the gameplay that I won't show you today, but it was quite a good challenge actually, and it had multiple parts to it where you had to solve about 5 puzzles in total before you could finally solve the major puzzle itself. And it did reward you with something really worth getting, so I can imagine that for a lot of players, the key to sort of the end game gear is going to be making sure that you're tackling not only the harder boss fights, but also the harder puzzles out there in the world. As for gear, the gameplay you're seeing is using sort of mid to late game gear. So you can see that we have sort of a buffed stamina bar, and also the particular weaponry that we have equipped is slightly higher level just to sort of help us get straight into the meat of the gameplay. There we go, with both of the pressure plates triggered, we can now activate this forge, and that is the quest updated, so we can move on to the next bit. Now, adventure is the next pillar that I want to show off, and obviously you can see already that this area of the map is huge. Luckily though, you have quite a few different ways to travel around. You can sprint, you can call in a steed and ride around a horse, or you can also fly.
To the forge!
Fenyx is well equipped with all of these kind of traversal methods, as well as climbing. It all comes together to really help you explore the ancient Greek islands that they've set this on. Right there you can see we earn a new weapon, the Tempered Sword, and also the Inferno, which we're going to equip. All of which have pretty cool signature styles to them that show off what that weapon's all about. So this new Inferno Sword is going to be focused on dealing that kind of damage. Now, flying does drain your stamina, so you can't do it forever, but you can clearly increase your stamina to allow you to travel a bit further. Right now, it seems we've got 2 full bars of it, which lets you either boost, or you could also dive, or you can just glide if you want to sort of take it a bit slower. Climbing also does drain your stamina, so you have to make sure that you're leaving enough stamina for you to get down to safety, otherwise you might be taking a lot of damage. But this is just a small area of the map, don't forget guys. This is one area. We weren't able to see any of the other ones in this particular gameplay demo, but I think if I remember correctly, there was about 6 or 7 different areas in total, all of which you're going to be exploring as you play Immortals. And it is well worth exploring, I'd say, because there are these different vaults and hidden secrets to find, other puzzles that you can check out. And here's what happens when you run out of stamina. So you're going to make sure that you keep an eye on that stamina bar. These little wind tunnels seem to be a pretty consistent theme around this area, and I think some of the puzzles might even ask you to navigate a course using them, which is pretty cool. Eventually I'll figure out how to stay in place and get up this mountainside though. There we go. One thing that I was definitely impressed by was the fairly unique art style. Although not incredibly detailed, there was also still that top level detail in the world itself. There's loads of things going on, whether it's particle effects, the shadows are really nice, the smoke effects, especially when you're in combat, it all comes together and it really does create quite an impressive sort of display of lights, sounds, and it's actually quite beautiful. But it is a very specific art style they've chosen, and it's going to be quite easy to tell apart from other games, I think. So now we're going to come up to a pretty cool boss fight against what I assume is the major boss of this area. And you can see those red attacks on his legs. Those are what we call unparryable. So the only way that you can sort of defend against those is either get away or use your dash. And dashing in this game is really important because it actually helps slow down time, which can help you with figuring out what your next move is going to be. And it took me a while to figure out how to sort of deal with this automaton, but we get there in the end. Using a mixture of our different godly abilities, some clever parrying, some clever dashing. You start to really get into sort of a rhythm in the combat that helps you take on large groups of enemies as well as these bigger bosses. It's very easy to get overwhelmed by a large group of enemies, especially when they sort of mix attacks between ranged and close combat. But there's definitely an art to it, which becomes really, really rewarding the more you play. As for this boss fight, you can see that it's got two bars. The top bar is its health, which you can see is slowly going down. The bottom bar, which is the blue bar, is its sort of stamina. And if you can reduce that, or sorry, fill that to full, you'll actually stun the enemy, which will open them up to a barrage of attacks until they sort of get back on their feet. But yeah, really important to pay attention to both of those bars to make sure that you're dealing the right amount of damage, but also getting them in a position where they're super vulnerable. And finally I figure out, oh, I could just hide behind this anvil. And the laser won't get me. Gave me enough time to use a potion to get some stamina back up so I can go back on the offensive. And there we go, the enemy was gassed then. You can see the birds tweeting around his head. And now you can see that the bar has actually turned into a gold bar from that blue one. And it sort of ticks down to show you how much time you've got left until they get back on their feet. So this game definitely gives you all the information you need to be able to fight the enemies, dealing as much damage as possible, as well as avoiding as much damage. And again, I've got that laser attack figured out now. Some might call it cheesing. But hey, if I win the fight, I win the fight. So again, I'm avoiding those unparryable attacks as best as I can. Keeping my distance. And just sort of studying what the opponent's attacks actually do. A lot of the attacks in this game are telegraphed, which means if you can recognize the pattern of attacks that they're doing, you start to learn the rhythm of how to fight them. Obviously, it took me a while to figure this guy out, but luckily, I managed to finish him off just before he can finish me.
Through your help, Phoenix restored power to the Forge as Hephaestus' workshop came roaring back to life.
Translation. Everyone can go home happy.
That's why. You are fools to think I was so easily conquered. Come, mortal, and face your real past. Me!
Wait! How much more of this story is there?
A lot. So send Hermes out for delivery, because we aren't going anywhere.
So that looks pretty intimidating. But yeah, that would be the final boss area, I assume, for the game, which is centered actually in the very middle of the map, which we'll take a little look at right now. after we check out some of our gear in particular. So we earned a couple of new pieces there, the automaton gear set, the helm of the ethereal automaton, as well as the chest plate. And all the different gear in the game has different stats to them, as well as being upgradable, which is pretty sweet. So you're going to be able to customize your sort of gear set, and this is where the RPG elements come into play, as well as there being a skill tree, which, although we weren't able to modify during this game demo, we did get to look at, which I'll show you later on in the video, which obviously goes through all the sort of adjustments you can make to the godly abilities, as well as any extra abilities that you can pick up. For the next bit of the game, though, we're going to take a look at some of the trials. And this one in particular is called Odysseus Struggle, which is something we played earlier on in the game demo. And it kind of taught us a lot of the mechanics in the game, but it also sort of is a sign of things to come in terms of the complexity of these different trials and what you can sort of earn from them as well. Definitely goes to show that they are well worth doing, because you earn the very specific currency that's used in game to upgrade your character. So you're going to need to do quite a few of these trials, I think, if you want to earn yourself a end game build. But they're actually pretty fun to do. There's a bit of puzzle work to them. There's a bit of sort of platforming and gameplay mechanic understanding that you need in order to complete them. But overall, this one wasn't too bad. It was sort of breaking us in so that we got to learn the game a bit better. It's at this point I realized that that's just to reset the puzzle. And there we go. With both crystals lit, we create the staircase up to the next platforming section. Pretty good throw. As I mentioned, this is definitely one of the more simple trials, but they do become much more complicated as you play. And in fact, some of them aren't even centered around puzzles at all. There's one that I do play later on in my gameplay demo that was actually focused on combat instead. So you'll sort of have a bit of an idea of what to expect before you go into the trial, but it's worth noting that it's not just going to be sort of head-scratching puzzles that you'll be encountering in these. Another good throw.
Keep that steady hand, little one, and you might just survive.
So we were just getting taunted by Typhon there, and just to go over sort of a brief outline of what the plot is, basically you play as Phoenix, and she's a mortal that has come along to help out the gods who have all been imprisoned by Typhon's rage as he sort of opens up portals into a different realm. So you're going to be basically powering up, getting ready to fight Typhon, and eventually I imagine you will face him. Each of these godly abilities that you earn are sort of like gifts from each particular god that you might be helping. And here we go, the big prize right at the end. So as I mentioned, Zeus's lightning is going to be one of the major currencies in the game that you're going to use in order to level up some of your abilities. And we've got the full skill list right here. You can see it ranges from everything from bow skills to combos that you can learn, and just basically improving them or adding certain perks to it. So it's all going to be quite a lighter RPG element, but something that definitely allows you to customize your own version of Phoenix to suit your needs, really. As I mentioned, we weren't able to customize this one ourselves. It's filled out with a preset of skills that we would find useful. But when the game launches, you'll be able to play around with it yourself and find a build that suits you best. Then we also have the godly powers, as I mentioned before, which are, as far as I'm aware, the 6 are sort of preordained. So you've got Athena's dash, Heracles' strength, Ares' wrath, Phosphor's attack, who's your little Phoenix buddy, Apollo's arrows, and finally my favourite, Hephaestus' hammer, which deals tons of damage, and each one you can see has a sort of secondary skill tree attached to them, which will let you customize their effectiveness or add modifiers onto them as well. As for the map, as I mentioned, this whole gameplay demo we played was limited to one area, which was Hephaestus' area, where he keeps the hammer, the Forge of the Gods. But the actual map itself is absolutely massive. And I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun sort of fighting through all the sort of varied landscapes that we'll encounter and seeing the different enemy types that come with that as well. One thing worth noting is you can actually tame wild animals here. So although we had a level 3 horse already given to us, I was able to tame a couple of level 1 horses, and you can actually just choose them on the fly and swap horses to whatever suits you. But why muck around? Let's jump into a big fight. Yeah, that guy. So this was some secondary side quest content that I decided to go off and do on my own, which just goes to show that the adventure side of this game is definitely well and truly alive. But yeah, Lieutenant Brontes was about to meet his match. Luckily I had a few health potions though, otherwise it could have gone a lot differently. So same as before with the automaton, we've also got his health up front and then his gas meter, or his sort of stamina at the bottom, which again you can lead him into being stunned if you keep up the combos. There you go, that's what a dash does for you. It gives you some extra time to sort of plan out your attacks, slows down your enemies for a brief moment. And I think it also allows you to deal more damage to their sort of gas meter as well, so that you can get them stunned a bit quicker. So like I said earlier in the video, I think dashing is going to be one of the key components to making sure that you win in fights in Immortals. I just loved that uppercut and then Hephaestus hammer attack. I thought that was a really fun combo. Plus, it actually tended to deal quite a lot of damage, and in some cases, I'd noticed that it would actually stun enemies almost immediately. So there's definitely going to be some fun gameplay combos that you guys can learn when you get hands-on with this title. And there we go. Side quest complete. Another big beast out of the way. So right now here, we're just going to finish up the video by showing you guys solving one of the more complicated puzzles that I had to encounter in my gameplay demo. And it was to gather these blue orbs to solve the constellation puzzle at the bottom. And this was just one of the trials that I had to do in order to gain one of the orbs. And I think if I remember correctly, there were 5 orbs in total. I had to find 2 orbs alone just to find a third. And it was quite complicated. You know, it was one of the tougher puzzles that I encountered on the map. And I'm sure that there's going to be more than one of these when the full game releases. It was a lot of fun to try and solve. You can see there, I've got a sort of a star map that I have to match with the orbs themselves. So it's quite a cute little puzzle that I enjoyed. Last but not least. One right there. And with that, a nice little reward as well. We get some extra currency that can help us get to some higher level gear as well. The coins of Sharon.
I'm no jealous.
So there you have it, guys. That is a sneak preview at Immortals Fenyx Rising. Let us know what you thought down in the comments below. And don't forget, if you want to see some more sneak previews of upcoming games for the Series X and the Series S, make sure to drop a sub, hit that notification bell, and we will see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!